What's it like to be enlightened? Let me tell you, it is perpetual bliss. Every cell of your body sings with love of the divine, and your very soul vibrates with bliss. Now, there are several stages of enlightenment, and we have to clarify those before we can speak clearly about what it is to be enlightened, because every stage of enlightenment has its own characteristics. What I just described is what you experience in what we call God consciousness and unity consciousness, and also in the next level, Sahaja Samadhi. The first level of enlightenment, or self-realization, as it is properly called, because you realize the self in this state, or at this stage, is a state where you have got rid of all identifications with not you, with the personality, the body, the mind, the feelings, everything. And you have merged your self-awareness into the unmanifest self. That means, since the self, absolute self, is unmanifest, that if you look within, there's only void. There's nothing. Now, if you have this state clearly, which most of these contemporary Neo-Advaita teachers have, and you can read their books and get a clear idea of what pure self-realization without Shakti is. Muji is a great example of that. You will find that there is void, there is nothing, and this unmanifest pure being is realized as your essential self. Now, since you cannot progress any further inwards, many teachers fall into the trap of thinking that there cannot be anything higher than this, but there is. The next stage of enlightenment is called God consciousness. And you cannot reach God consciousness without Shakti. You have to understand that there are two aspects to the self. One aspect is pure being, which is traditionally called Shiva, metaphorically, and that is like a completely still ocean. Nothing moves, nothing shakes it. It is totally still and unmovable. This is self-realization without Shakti, pure self-realization. Now, this void, this pure being, is composed of two aspects which are really one. One is Shiva, the pure being, eternally self-absorbed and resting, and the other is potential creative dynamic force called Shakti. And to reach God consciousness, you have to enliven Shakti so it begins to permeate your entire being all the way into your physical presence in the world. And when that happens and you've reached God consciousness, you live in a state where you are totally in love with everything. It is para bhakti, beyond regular bhakti. Normal bhakti is a mood. Bhakti means devotion. Para bhakti is beyond this mood. It is supreme devotion, and you're in love with God in everything. Now, these misguided Neo-Advaitins who believe the unmanifest absolute is the end and all of enlightenment will disregard this and reject this as an experience. And in one sense you can say it is, and in another sense you can say it is the next step, because in pure self-realization you realize the absolute self within. And then you have to realize the absolute self without. And you do that in unity consciousness. And the intermediate step between pure self-realization and unity consciousness is God consciousness. And in God consciousness, you live in a state of what I call non-dual devotion. You love Shakti in everything, as the Divine Mother, as God. On the path, the tradition that I teach, we tend to feel this loving kindness for the Divine as Mother. You could also experience it as Father or other aspects, brother, sister, whatnot. But in my tradition and what I teach, we have this loving, caring, graceful aspect which fills you because of Shaktipat, and that has a motherly quality to it. So we talk about experiencing the Divine Mother in everything, and that fills you with love and devotion for everything. But you also experience Mother within. So it's non-dual devotion. Now that's a paradox. How can it be non-dual and devotion at the same time? Because devotion implies a subject and an object, and the subject is devoted to the object. But nevertheless, in God consciousness, it is non-dual. You live in a state of constant love. Love for everything. Love for the bookshelves, for the camera, for the lamps, for the flowers, for the sky, for the animals, for a cold beer, for everything. The next thing that happens is that God consciousness, the subtle duality that's inherent in it, gets dissolved, and you realize that this Shakti that you see in everything is the self. And this fills you with bliss. The whole body sings with bliss. You realize in a joyful, blissful, ecstatic recognition that the self is everything. Everything is full of the self, and through Shakti is a manifestation of the self. And you realize that this self is the same as yourself. Now, how can you have that realization without being in love with everything? It's not possible. And in addition, because your whole body is permeated with Shakti, every cell in the body tingles with bliss. And when I say bliss, I do not mean bliss in a mundane, joyful sense. Bliss is beyond ecstasy. When you meditate in the beginning, you first go into states of ecstasy, which is very agitated. The eyelids flicker, you have inner light, the thoughts go amok, the heart beats violently, you begin to sweat even though you might not be hot, and there's extreme joy. But then you have to pass beyond that, and then suddenly the agitated ecstasy becomes this unperturbed, silent ocean without a wave, yet extremely blissful. This is with Shakti, Shakti active through the grace of Shaktipat. Now, if you don't have Shakti activated, you will have this void without the bliss and ecstasy, and you will reject the ecstasy as a mere experience. But it's not, it's a stage further ahead of mere void, realization of the self as just unmanifest. Now, this, even though you have this bliss all the time, it goes up and down, even in unity consciousness. You might in the morning be extremely blissful, a couple of hours later not so blissful, and then a couple of hours later in the afternoon extremely full of love and bliss, which I call love bliss, and so on. And then when you meditate, you just dive into this ocean of unmanifest pure being, and the bliss explodes out of you as waves of love, bliss, joy, compassion. And all you want to do is share it with those around you. This is unity consciousness, when you meditate in unity consciousness. Now the next step is Sahaja Samadhi. In Sahaja Samadhi, the bliss, love, joy becomes quite stable. It can still go up and down, but rather than being down and then up and then down and then up, it levels to a middle stage and sometimes goes a little down, sometimes a little up. But it's so stable that you always have this loving compassion, love, bliss, joy for everything around you. And you realize that everything and everybody is yourself, and that everybody is already enlightened. They just don't know it. And this direct cognition of the state of enlightenment and ignorance fills you with compassion. You just want to help your fellow beings get realized. And basically in Sahaja Samadhi, there's not terribly much left to live for. I mean, you have your worldly life and you have to make money to survive and take care of your family and so on and so forth, and you do that, but your basic urge is, or rather arises out of this love and compassion. And wherever you go, you share it. You share it with the plants, with the air, with the pavement, with the frozen goods in the supermarket, with everything. There's no exception. With all my heart, I sincerely wish that you will reach this state.